Welcome to Couch Intelligence Report. Hi everybody, my name is Lily. Today we are unpacking a major cyber story of 2025. It's a wave of intrusions that targeted the US telecommunications systems, including AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and other ones. Now, this intrusion was linked by the US agencies and also private researchers to Chinese-affiliated attackers, or should we say hackers. Now, we'll walk through what investigators say that happened, how these intrusions worked, and why does it matter to any of us. We can also talk about how authorities responded and what this means for everyday users. Let's go. In 2025, US agencies and cybersecurity firms revealed a broad campaign that penetrated multiple telecommunications companies and critical network. Now, that was enough to trigger emergency directives, sanctions, and joint advisories from federal authorities. These telecom companies are the pipes of modern life. They carry our calls, texts, internet traffic, and even data used by first responders. When those networks are compromised, it's not just a tech problem. It's a national security and public safety issue. The question is, why is this not a major news piece that's on our TVs and social media every day? Now, not only that, meaning the threat actors, could read unencrypted text messages and other communications, meaning if you were using regular phone calls, they potentially could hear it. They potentially could listen in those phone calls, read your text messages. I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the year in 2025, we got an advisory from the government to use encrypted phone call and text messaging applications such as Signal. So if you remember back in the time, that's what the US government was advising, meaning, and this is how I interpret it, they couldn't get a hold, they couldn't secure our communications networks. So it was up to the individual users to secure their own. Something else that the threat actors linked to the Chinese could do was to tap into the wiretap approved phone records and established which of their spies were being legally wiretapped by the American government. So to sum it up, when the government wants to listen in the conversations of people residing in the United States, and I know it's different for American citizens than it is for non-citizens. However, in general, as a rule, if the government, if the police, if any of our federal agencies want to listen into your phone calls because you are deemed a person of interest, they have to go through legal channels. They have to procure a warrant from a judge that would allow them to tap into your conversations, your text messages, and so on. Now, threat actor, which we called Salt Typhoon, that's the name of the Advanced Persistent Threat Actor, APT. They were able to determine which were those phones that were being wiretapped by the American government and determine if any of their spies were being targeted by the government, basically. Now, we can't conclude if they managed to do that. I would go with the assumption that they did. Maybe that's just me. Let's talk about a short timeline here. The reporting in mid-2025 revealed evidence that intrusions into at least one major US telecom dated back to 2023, meaning malicious access may have persisted for years before public disclosure. Now, private sector investigations and news reporting and all that, including major outlets and security firms, linked this activity to groups that Microsoft and others have labeled as Salt Typhoon. Now, Salt Typhoon is an APT, Advanced Persistent Threat group from China. It has been affiliated to the Chinese and is responsible for compromises across different telecom infrastructures. Some examples: in January 2025 and throughout the year, the US Treasury and the DOJ, Department of Justice, announced sanctions and criminal actions tied to Chinese-linked cyber actors, targeting critical infrastructure and data brokers. Now, by late summer and into September of 2025, the FBI and CISA issued broader advisories and warnings that the campaign had expanded and impacted dozens of companies, prompting emergency reviews of network equipment and immediate mitigation actions. Now, what is it that these actors actually did? Well, every incident has its own technical details, and I'm not going to bore you too much with that. But basically, there are several recurring patterns that one can establish in the reporting and the advisories for this specific APT. Now, first, it started by compromising core routers and edge devices. So the attackers sought access to backbone routers, provided edge and customer edge devices, meaning these devices had access to both the telecom and the clients. Now, the hardware is very important to establish that it was firstly the hardware that was compromised. This is the hardware that moves traffic across different networks, meaning routers. There were other types. However, let's just focus on the routers. We all have one at home. So either one of the telecoms themselves gave you a router or rented you a router, or you bought it on Amazon. And that's what routes the service from the telecom to your house. Now, persistent backdoors were also established and firmware level manipulation. Some of these intrusions use techniques that are reboot proof, meaning even if you rebooted your devices, they will persist. Yeah, persistent. Now, these attackers could modify these devices in ways that was very hard to remove without deeper remediation, meaning the regular user was not going to be able to remove that. And that's why the agencies told operators to inspect specific indicators and, in some cases, to disconnect those affected boxes. So overall, the theme here is we can't figure it out. Just disconnect it and tell the public to use their own encrypted apps. Now, what else happened? Data theft and call record access. So beyond control, these intrusions enabled theft of call detail records, CDRs, and other sensitive subscriber data, potentially exposing the contents of metadata of communications for targeted individuals. Remember when we talked about those that were being wiretapped by the US government? That's what they mean. Now, that's why the US, and again, this I'm gonna highlight, the US issued a joint statement about the PRC affiliated targeting of telecoms. So the Chinese hacked our telecommunication systems, potentially listened in calls from president and vice president, potentially hacked and stole data from the users, were able to listen in specific devices that were being wiretapped by the government. And the US issues a joint statement. Nothing else from that? Okay. So another potential, so another potential problem is that there were SIM farms and the listed device networks. So the SIM card, we all know it. I mean, in 2025, you probably don't have a physical SIM card, but you know what it is, right? It's what gives signal to your phone or your tablet. So law enforcement found large-scale SIM server operations and devices that could be used to spoof, flood, or otherwise interfere with telecom devices. Now, this indicated that there was espionage and potential disruption capabilities in the system. Now think about the role that telecoms company play. They authenticate subscribers, they route calls and messages, they provide internet access to millions or billion of endpoints. Now, access to those systems can let attackers monitor communications and metadata at scale. They can pivot into customer networks or government contractor systems. They can disrupt emergency services or influence critical supply chains. That makes telecoms high-value targets for state-level espionage and also a strategic advantage in both peacetime intelligence and any future crisis. So, now what was the response? We partially covered that, but let's see a little bit more detail. What was the response for from the government and the industry in general? Now, authorities moved on several fronts. Key publicly known actions, including advisories and emergency directives. So CISA and FBI issued technical guidance and recommended mitigations. At times, they require federal agencies to audit specific vendors, devices, and to remove compromised equipment from networks. These companies were urged to patch, segment networks, and monitor for indicators of compromise. So everything so far is very reactive. And if you ask me, ineffective. But these tools aim to raise the cost for those who enable or run such campaigns. Sanctions. So I did find one company that was sanctioned and one individual that was arrested. Hopefully there's more than that. Now, private sector hardening and disclosure. So the telecoms and vendors, such as Cisco and others, released patches, advisories, and guidance. Security firms publish indicators to help defenders find malicious implants. So basically, the government asked the companies and the individuals to take care of it. Now, if you're listening and thinking, I am not a telecom operator, why should I care? Here's what matters and what you can do right now. First, practice basic digital hygiene. I know I've said this many times, but just change your password. If you reuse the same password, just get a password manager. Have different passwords for all your accounts. Then watch for privacy notices from your carrier. I would be paying attention if my carrier sends me information, if they'll notify me as a subscriber that there was any threat or there were any unexpected carrier notices that should be taken seriously. Also, of course, use end-to-end encrypted tools for sensitive communications. There are apps that provide end-to-end encryption, help protect message contents and stuff like that. I prefer Signal. You find your own. WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. I don't recommend it. It's up to you, honestly. Then consider device level protections. This is for just any kind of intrusion. Avoid connecting to untrusted Wi-Fi's. And I know you're at the airport, you just need signal. That's okay. If you have a VPN, try to use it. And then keep your operating system patched. Think about using a reputable VPN. And while none of this is a silver bullet, these steps can really help reduce exposure. Now, I would add on uninstalling any apps that you don't use anymore, just because these applications might not be as secured as your traditional applications. So if you're not using it, just either have the option to set it to sleep or uninstall it from your phone or your tablet. Now, to recap, 2025 brought public confirmation at a large scale of that campaign that targeted the US. If we've learned anything from this episode, is that you on your own, so make sure you secure your devices. Now, on this episode useful, please subscribe to Couch Intelligence Report. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions or if you have suggestions as to what the next episode should be about. And I'm Lily. Stay curious, stay secure, everybody.